5. Spiritual signs you're a breaker chosen one. Can't deny it. There's something about you that doesn't quite fit in. You've known it for a long time, haven't you? You walk into rooms and feel the undercurrent of energy before a single word is spoken. You've always had this strange sensitivity, like you can feel what others are pretending not to feel. You pick up on the things no one says out loud, and even though you may have tried to normalize yourself, tried to shrink down, tried to blend in, something deep within you refuses to stay quiet. That something is the signature of a breaker chosen one. A soul not born to conform, but to disrupt. Not to follow the path, but to break it so a new one can emerge. You didn't come here to play safe. You came here to shift dimensions. So what is a breaker chosen one? It's not just a fancy spiritual label, it's a divine assignment. A breaker is someone who incarnates into systems, families, cultures, and timelines specifically to dismantle the old, outdated, and unconscious patterns that have been looping for generations. You're not here to improve the matrix, you're here to crack it open, to expose what's been hidden, to bring light to what's been denied. And that process, while powerful, is not always glamorous. In fact, it often starts with pain, deep pain, because before you break the system breaks you. And that's your first sign.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first undeniable sign that you're a breaker chosen one is that your life hasn't followed a predictable path. You've felt like an outsider, even in your own family. You may have been the black sheep, the sensitive one, the rebellious one, or the misunderstood one. But that wasn't a mistake. That was your soul choosing to not merge with the dysfunction around you. You weren't born to blend in, you were born to interrupt, and that interruption often begins with chaos. You may have gone through intense childhood trauma, emotional instability, or identity fragmentation, not because you were weak, but because your soul came here to absorb and transmute the unconscious energy of your lineage. That's a heavy task, but you chose it, because you knew what you were capable of, even if you forgot for a while. The second sign is your heightened sensitivity. You feel more, you see more, you know more, even when you don't know how you know. This sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's your power. You're wired this way so you can detect the fractures in the system. You notice when something isn't aligned. You feel when someone isn't being truthful. You sense when a space is holding stagnant energy. This is what makes you a breaker. You can't tolerate what others can ignore. You can't pretend everything's fine when it's clearly not. And while this has made relationships and jobs and normal life feel impossible at times, it's also your greatest gift. Because you weren't born to exist within the illusion, you were born to shatter it. And this leads us to the third sign. You go through intense cycles of destruction and rebirth. Just when you think you've stabilized, something collapses, a relationship ends, a job falls apart, a belief system crumbles. This isn't because you're cursed, it's because your soul demands evolution. You outgrow realities faster than most people are even aware there are other realities. And every time something collapses, it's because on a soul level, you've already moved beyond it. Breakers don't get to coast. You're here to burn down the old temples. That means your life will often feel like a series of deaths. But every death is a portal. Every collapse is a clearing. Every ending is a beginning you couldn't have orchestrated with your mind. Have you noticed how every time you lose something, you gain clarity? Every time you fall apart, you rise with more truth. That's not accidental. That's the pattern of a soul doing the deep work of dismantling timelines. And then there's the fourth sign. Your presence triggers others. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you carry frequency codes that disrupt unconsciousness. You walk into a room and people feel seen, even if you haven't said a word. Your energy reflects back people's unhealed shadows, and for those who aren't ready to face themselves, that can feel threatening. Have you ever found that people project onto you, misunderstand you, resist you even though your intentions are pure? That's not personal, that's energetic. You are a mirror, a catalyst, a breaker. Your very existence challenges the status quo. And the more you own that, the more you stop trying to be liked and start being true. But the most powerful sign, the fifth, is that you've always felt called to something greater, even when you didn't have the words, even when you didn't have the map. There's always been a sense that your life has a deeper purpose, that you're here for a mission, that something big is coming, and that call won't let you rest. It pulls you through the darkness. It whispers to you in the silence. It reminds you that no matter how lost you feel, you are exactly where you need to be. Because the path of the breaker is not linear. It's quantum, it's messy, it's wild, but it's sacred. You are here to remember your power, to reclaim your voice, to realign your life with your highest frequency, and every challenge, every loss, every breakdown has been preparing you for that moment. So now I ask you the question that only you can answer. What are you being asked to break right now? What system, what pattern, what belief, what lie is your soul no longer willing to carry? Because when you answer that honestly, everything begins to shift. You stop trying to fix the old, you start building the new. You stop trying to survive the matrix, you realize you were born to rewrite it. The sacred disruptor code, why breakers must collapse before they rise. There's a sacred law written into the soul contract of every breaker, and it's this: before you rise, you must collapse. Not because you're being punished, not because you're broken, but because the foundation that was built around you was never made to hold the truth of who you really are. So it must fall apart. It has to. The identity, the conditioning, the labels you were given, the roles you were told to play, they were scaffolding, not structure. They were survival masks, not soul expressions. And when the time comes for you to activate your true blueprint, those old structures become too small, too suffocating, too false. It's like your soul starts turning up the volume, and suddenly everything that isn't aligned begins to shake, break, and unravel. You can't pretend anymore. You can't force yourself to stay in places your spirit has already outgrown. And that collapse, it hurts. But it's sacred. It's the disruptor code at work. You see, breakers carry within them a frequency that is incompatible with illusion. You are encoded with truth. And when that truth remains dormant, your life feels like static, confusing, painful, out of sync. But when that truth begins to activate, your very presence disrupts the lies you've been living under. And that disruption starts within. That's why the collapse doesn't begin outside of you, it begins in you. It's the moment you realize you can't keep betraying yourself to make others comfortable. It's the moment you stop gaslighting your own intuition. It's the moment you admit that the life you've built, no matter how pretty it looks on the outside, is not in alignment with your soul. And so it falls. Sometimes slowly, like a quiet erosion, sometimes suddenly, like a lightning strike, Relationships dissolve, careers end, beliefs disintegrate. The people you thought would always be there just fade. And it can feel like death, because in a way it is. It's the death of the version of you that was created to survive the world, not to transform it. It's the end of the mask. The ego tries to hold on. It panics. It clutches. It screams what will happen to us if we let this go. But your soul already knows. You will rise. Not as a copy of what came before, not as a diluted version of yourself, but as the original frequency you were always meant to embody. The collapse is the initiation. It's not a punishment, it's a purification. You are being stripped down to essence so that what is real can emerge. And in that space of nothingness, in that void, you start to remember. You remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You remember your knowing, your vision, your purpose. You remember that you didn't come here to be safe. You came here to be sovereign. And sovereignty requires truth. It requires dismantling every lie that ever told you you weren't enough. But here's the paradox. The collapse hurts because it's working. If you didn't feel it, it wouldn't be real. The pain isn't a sign you're failing. It's a sign you're finally facing. And what you're facing isn't just your own stuff, it's ancestral. It's collective. Breakers are soul-level interrupters of generational timelines. You're not just healing yourself, you're breaking the patterns that your bloodline has carried for centuries. The trauma, the silence, the shame, the fear, it ends with you. And that's not a light burden to carry. That's why your breakdowns feel cosmic, because they are. You're not just facing your own darkness, you're dissolving the darkness that's been passed down like sacred firewood. And now you're choosing to burn it, not carry it. That's bravery. That's mastery. That's the breaker in you rising. But you can't rise if you're still clinging to what's falling. That's the hardest part. Letting go. Not just of people or jobs or identities, but of the story that says you need to be anything other than who you are. You have to let that story die. You have to surrender to the unknown. You have to trust that the collapse is not the end of you, it's the beginning of your becoming. And in that sacred surrender, something shifts. You stop fighting, you start listening, you begin to feel the stirrings of something new. A clarity, a calling, a knowing that says, "This is why I came." So I ask you now, with love and fire, what are you still holding on to that is keeping you from rising? What illusion do you still believe that is keeping you small? What would happen if you stopped resisting the collapse and started honoring it as your sacred rite of passage? Because once you do, the game changes. The fear starts to melt, the grief becomes fuel, and from the ashes of everything you thought you needed, you begin to remember who you are. The unshakable frequency, how breakers activate a new reality through their vibration alone. There comes a moment in the journey of every breaker when you stop trying to fix the old and start realizing that your mere energetic presence is building the new. It's not about what you do, it's about what you are. And what you are is frequency. Not in a poetic, abstract way, but in a real vibrational sense. Your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, your alignment, they emit a signal, a code. And that code doesn't just affect you, it shapes the field around you. This is why breakers don't need to fight the system, they override it. Not through force, but through frequency. When you embody a higher vibration, lower vibrations simply can't sustain themselves in your presence. They either rise, resist, or fall away. That's the power you hold. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because you've committed to being authentically you. And authenticity is one of the highest frequencies on Earth. So many of us were taught to believe that change happens through effort, through strategy, through external action. And yes, those things have their place. But the deepest transformation doesn't begin on the outside. It begins in your field, in your energy, in your beingness. When you shift your frequency, you shift your reality. And that shift is not theoretical, it's tangible. You begin to attract new people, new opportunities, new timelines. But more importantly, you begin to repel the things that no longer resonate. This is why, after the collapse, life can feel strangely empty. People disappear, old habits lose their grip. You might even feel disconnected from everything you used to care about. But that's not emptiness, that's clarity. That's your field recalibrating to your new vibration. And here's the secret that no one tells you. Your frequency is your leadership. You don't have to convince people of anything. You don't have to argue or debate or prove. When your vibration is aligned, people feel it. They might not know why they're drawn to you, but they are. They might not understand what's changing in their own energy around you, but something is, because authenticity is contagious. Integrity is magnetic, and coherence, when your inner world matches your outer expression, is one of the most powerful forces in existence. That's what makes you unshakable. Not that you never feel fear or doubt, but that you no longer abandon yourself in the face of them. Breakers activate new realities simply by choosing to stay true to their essence, no matter the cost. And that choice, not once, but moment by moment, is how timelines shift. You begin to operate outside the matrix of fear and manipulation. You stop playing roles. You stop performing. You stop compromising your truth for acceptance. And that creates a ripple. First, in your own life. Then in your relationship. Then in your community. Then in the collective. This is how revolutions begin. Not with noise, but with frequency. Silent, steady, undeniable. But let's be real, holding your frequency isn't always easy, especially when the world around you is still operating from distortion. You'll be tested, not by some external force, but by life reflecting back the parts of you that are still unhealed. You'll be tempted to shrink, to go back to the familiar, to compromise. And in those moments, the question becomes, can you stay in your vibration when no one else understands it? Can you stay in your truth when it costs you everything you thought you needed? Can you trust that your frequency will lead you, even when the path is invisible? Because when you do, something miraculous happens. You start to notice that your life isn't being controlled anymore. It's being created, not by your mind, but by your field. You walk into rooms and shift the energy without speaking. You sit in silence and receive answers you didn't ask for. You think of someone and they call. You desire something and it begins to appear, not because you're aligned with it. That's what it means to be a breaker. You don't chase reality, you command it through coherence. And let's talk about coherence for a moment, because this is the language of the new earth. Coherence means your thoughts, emotions, actions, and intentions are in harmony. You're not saying one thing and doing another. You're not pretending to be calm while suppressing rage. You're not performing spirituality while secretly drowning in shame. Coherence is raw, it's real, it's messy, but it's honest. And that honesty is what makes your frequency indestructible. When you stop fragmenting yourself for approval, you become whole. And wholeness is the ultimate frequency hack. It's the vibration that says, I know who I am and I refuse to be anything else. So the next time you feel like nothing's changing, ask yourself not, what do I need to do, but what frequency am I holding? Because that's the question that rewrites the code. That's the question that opens portals. That's the question that reminds you, you are not here to fit into the world. You are here to retune it to a higher octave, just by being fully, wildly, unapologetically you. Legacy of the Breaker, becoming the blueprint for future souls to follow. There's a moment in every breaker's journey when you realize this was never just about you, that all the pain, all the collapse, all the initiations you endured weren't only to free yourself, but to carve a path for others. You start to see that your healing is not isolated. Every time you break a pattern, you're breaking it for your lineage. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you're coding that truth into the collective field. Every time you embody your soul in a world that rewards masks, you make it easier for someone else to do the same. This is the legacy of the Breaker. Not fame, not followers, not recognition, but resonance. You become the living blueprint of what's possible when a soul chooses to remember. And that's what you are now, a living transmission, a frequency holder for the new earth. You didn't come here to be perfect, you came here to be real, to show others that it's safe to feel, to fall, to rise again. You came to embody a new template of power, one rooted not in dominance but in presence, one that doesn't seek to conquer but to connect. You're not here to lead through hierarchy, you're here to lead through authenticity. And it's that authenticity that becomes your legacy. Not what you say, but how you live. Not what you teach, but what you embody. We often underestimate the impact of our healing. We think if we're not changing the world in some big, visible way, we're not doing enough. But the truth is, every time you choose to respond with love instead of fear, you shift the timeline. Every time you hold compassion for yourself instead of judgment, you anchor more light into the field. Every time you choose to stay present in your body instead of dissociating, you're creating a new energetic map for others to follow. That's how revolutions begin. Quietly, internally, radically. And the beauty of this path is that you don't need to know the whole plan. You just have to follow the next aligned yes. The soul doesn't lead in straight lines. It leads in spirals, in whispers, in sacred nudges. And every time you listen, you deepen your connection to your own divine intelligence. That connection is the real legacy. Because when you're connected, you become a lighthouse, not by trying to be one, simply by staying lit. Others will feel it. They might not understand it, they might even resist it, but they will be moved, inspired, awakened, not because you gave them answers, but because you reminded them of their own. That's the gift of the Breaker. You don't save people, you activate them. You show them that it's possible to be fully in your power without losing your heart. You show them that it's safe to collapse and beautiful to rise. So if you've ever wondered, why me? This is your answer, because you said yes before this lifetime, before the density, before the forgetting. You said yes to being the one who would break what needed breaking, who would feel what others refused to feel, who would stand, heart open, in the middle of the storm and say, it ends with me. That's not weakness, that's divinity in motion. And now, as you walk forward, know this, you are not alone. There are others like you, scattered across the planet, quietly doing the work, holding the line, building the new. You may not see them, but you are connected. By vibration, by mission, by heart. And every time you rise, you send a signal to them. We're still here, we're still rising, we are the new Earth. And we're remembering together, so I'll leave you with this. What kind of ancestor do you want to be? What kind of energetic imprint do you want to leave behind? What kind of world are you building with your frequency, your presence, your breath? Because the truth is, your legacy is not someday, it's now. It's in every choice, every word, every moment you choose to be who you really are. And if you've made it this far, then you already know you're not just a breaker. You're a builder. You're a guide. You're a living blueprint for the future. And the future is already listening.